Coming at you live from the beautiful heartland of these good old United States of America, right at the confluence of the mighty Mississippi and the majestic Missouri rivers, St. Charles, Missouri. This is The Rant. I am your host, Charles Lamson. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours. All right, today is Sunday, 24th day of November, year of our Lord, 2019. Today's topic, going to be doing another economic and financial review. Let's see here. In which, first half of the big show, once again, going to be having a seance. This is the mystical, esoteric part of the show, where I use my skills as a dark practitioner of necromancy and the black arts to summon the spirits of great minds from the past to help us through these times of great economic and political turmoil and uncertainty. Today, we're going to, once again, summon the spirit of Alfred Marshall. This has been a very big, long, in-depth seance with him. It's been going on for months now. He's going to, through a crack team of mediums, or media, I guess you would say, yeah. Through a crack team of spiritual media, he's going to share with us his principles of economics. Okay, and so while I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing an inspirational, motivational, instructional fitness video as well for the folks watching on YouTube. And so you'll definitely want to tune in for that. And let's see what else. Okay, so after the first, when the first half of the show is over, approximately an hour into the show, I'm going to close the seance with the banishing ritual and send Alfred Marshall's soul straight back to hell where he belongs. And then we're going to talk about timely top stories in the world of finance. Also, I'd like to just throw out a friendly reminder there to everyone. The Rant with Charles Lamson is completely audience supported. So, to donate, please send a cash check or money order to Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. Once again, that's Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. And another bit of programming news. I'm excited to announce I'm going to be doing one day a week, Friday from 11 to 1 Central. I'm going to be doing a show on revolutionradio.com. Or no, it's not .com. It's Revolution Radio. I'll be putting the info, yeah, to get there, you just go, it's freedomslips.com, freedomslips.com. So yeah, I'll be doing pretty exciting stuff. We'll be doing a show there from 11 to 1 every Friday, Central Time. So tell your family, tell your friends. It's a pretty cool station. I'm a big fan of their programming, to be quite honest. So I'm excited about that. Okay, so the programming news. Okay, my begging is out of the way, and okay, so yeah, the second half of the show, going to be talking about what, like I said, going to be talking about timely top stories in the world of finance, and these stories should be a little bit better today. I'll tell you why, I guess, when I come back, but. Okay, without further ado, let's get the shindig started. Alfred, please come to us. Share with us your principles of economics, please, sir.
Net income, and the burden on him is apt to be heavy in those very rare cases in which onerous rural rates are increased greatly. As already indicated, an onerous rate confined to one district is likely to press more heavily on the local landlords and farmers than if general throughout the country. Note 72. Paragraph 8. This volume is mainly occupied with scientific enquiries, but yet not without some glances at the practical issues, which supply a motive to economic studies. Note 73. And here, some consideration of policy seems desirable in regard to rates. For all economists are agreed that land in an old country resembles other forms of wealth in many respects, and that it differs in others. And in some recent controversial writings, there has appeared a tendency to relegate the points of difference to a secondary place, and to give almost exclusive prominence to those of similarity. A moderate tendency in that direction might be judicious if the points of similarity alone were of high importance in urgent practical issues. But the contrary is a fact, and therefore it may be well to consider some great issues of administrative finance, in which a leading part is played by those attributes of land which are not largely shared by other forms of wealth. But first, a little must be said as to equity. When a special tax is levied for a particular purpose, and the case is not one for any interference by public authority with existing rights of ownership, as for instance, when an arterial system of land drainage is created, the owners of the properties to be benefited may fitly be assessed on the joint stock principle, according to which calls are made from shareholders in proportion to their stake in the common venture. The equity of every such charge must be judged separately. But on the other hand, all onerous taxes and rates must be judged in equity as a whole. Almost every onerous tax, taken by itself, presses with undue weight on some class or other. But this is of no moment so long as the inequalities of each are compensated by those of others, and variations in the several parts synchronized. If that difficult condition is satisfied, the system may be equitable, though any one part of it regarded alone would be inequitable. Secondly, there is a general agreement that a system of taxation should be adjusted in more or less steep gradation to people's incomes, or better still, to their expenditures. For that part of a man's income which he saves contributes again to the exchequer until it is consumed by expenditure. Consequently, when considering the fact that our present system of taxation, general and local, bears heavily on houses, it should be remembered that large expenditure generally requires large house room, and that while taxes, and especially graduated taxes on expenditure in general, present great technical difficulties to the tax collector, and further cost much more to the consumer directly and indirectly than they bring into the revenue. Taxes on houses are technically simple, cheap in collection, not liable to evasion, and easy of graduation. Note 74. But thirdly, this argument does not apply to buildings other than houses, and for that reason, it may be equitable to tax shops, warehouses, factories, etc., on a lower scale than houses at all events as far as new rates are concerned. The burdens of old rates is already shifted from the occupiers of business premises, partly on to their landlords and partly on to their customers. This process of shifting is constantly going on, and therefore no great hardship would be inflicted on the trading classes in urban districts if they were charged at once with a farthing for every penny of new rates, while a part or the whole of the remaining three farthings were left to be added to their burden gradually by small annual percentages. It may be that some such plan will be necessary if the expenses of urban local government continue to increase fast. These considerations lead us to repeat that whether in an old or a new country, a far-seeing statesman will feel a greater responsibility to future generations when legislating as to land than as to other forms of wealth, and that from the economic and from the ethical point of view, land must everywhere and always be classed as a thing by itself. If from the first the state had retained true rent in its own hands, the vigor of industry and accumulation need not have been impaired, though in a very few cases, the settlement of new countries might have been delayed a little. Nothing at all like this can be said of the incomes derived from property made by man. But the very greatness of the public interests concerned makes it specially necessary to bear in mind when discussing the equities of the public value of land, that a sudden appropriation by the state of any incomes from property, the private ownership of which had once been recognized by it, would destroy security and shake the foundations of society. Sudden and extreme measures would be inequitable, and partly, but not solely for that reason, they would be unbusinesslike and even foolish. Caution is necessary, but the curse of high site values is that concentration of population, which is threatening a scarcity of fresh air and light and playroom, so grievous as to lower the vigor and the joyousness of the rising generation. Thus, rich private gains accrue, not merely through causes which are public rather than private in their character, but also at the expense of one of the chief forms of public wealth. Large expenditure is needed to secure air and light and playroom, and the most appropriate source from which that expense can be defrayed seems to be those extreme rights of private property in land, which have grown up almost imperceptibly from the time when the king, representing the state, was the sole landowner. Private persons were but landholders, subject to the obligation to work for the public well-being. They have no equitable right to mar that well-being by congested building. Paragraph 9. Accordingly, the following practical suggestions seem to emerge. As regards old rates, a sudden change in the person from whom they are collected seems unadvisable. But additional rates should, as far as may be convenient, be collected from the person on whom they are ultimately to unless, like the income tax under Schedule A, they are collected from the tenant with the instruction that they are to be deducted from his rent. The reasons for this are that nearly the whole of that part of old rates, which is assessed on public or site value of land, is already borne by owners, including lessees, so far as those rates go, which, though old, were not anticipated when their leases were taken. And nearly all the remainder of it is borne by tenants or their customers. This result would not be very greatly disturbed by allowing the tenant to deduct a half or even the whole of his rates from his rent. Though such a law would run some risk of handing over some of the property of the owners to lessees who had reckoned for paying those old rates when taking their leases. On the other hand, a provision for the division of new, that is, additional rates, would have great advantages. The occupier, whether of a firm or business premises or a house, would deduct one half of the new rates from his rent. His immediate landlord would deduct in proportion from his payment to the superior holder next to him, and so on. And in addition, new local taxes on business premises of all kinds might be assessed, as has just been suggested, at less than full rates in the first instance and gradually increased. By these provisions, farmers, shopkeepers, and other traders would be relieved from the occasional injustice and the constant fear of injustice, which are now associated with sudden disproportionate additions to the public burdens thrown upon particular classes. In regard to site values, it would seem well to rule that all land, whether technically urban or not, should be regarded as having a special site value if, when cleared of buildings, it could be sold at even a moderately high price, say 200 units an acre. It might then be subjected to a general rate assessed on its capital value, and in addition to a fresh air rate to be spent by local authority under full central control for the purposes indicated above. This fresh air rate would not be a very heavy burden on owners, for a good deal of it would be returned to them in the form of higher values for those building sites which remained. As it is, the expenditure of such private societies as the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association and much of the rates raised on building values for public improvements is really a free gift of wealth to owners who are already fortunate. For rural and urban districts alike, after reckoning for the initial rates on land, the remainder of the necessary funds would perhaps best be obtained by rates on immovable property, supplemented by some minor local taxes at the discretion of the local authorities. The inhabited house duty might be suppressed unless it was needed for any great new expenditure, such as old age pensions, and the main rates might be graduated as the present inhabited house duty is, but more gently for houses of moderate size and more severely for very large houses. But no one should be exempted altogether For so long as a person retains the right of voting on the levying and expenditure of rates, it is not safe that he should wholly escape their pressure. It may, however, be safe and reasonable to return to him or his children the equivalent of his payments in such benefits as will increase physical and mental health and vigor, and will not tend towards political corruption. Note 75. Notes for Marshall, Principles of Economics, Appendix G. Note 64. See pages 453 and 659. Note 65. Above, Chapter 5, Section 9, Paragraph 1. This appendix is largely based on the memorandum there mentioned. Note 66. Final Report of Royal Commission on Local Taxation, 1901, page 12. Note 67. A good deal of evidence on these points was taken by the commission just named, page 794. Note 68. See above, Chapter 5, Section 11, Paragraphs 3 and 8. The builder generally looks to sell his lease before much of it has run out, but the price which he expects to get is the discounted excess of the rental value of the property over the ground rent for the remaining years, and therefore the substance of his calculations is nearly the same as it would be if he intended to keep the property in his own hands. Note 69. This assumes that the land is assessed to the tax at the same amount, whatever the use to which it is put. The case of an extra tax for a special use can be treated as in Chapter 5, Section 10, Paragraph 6. If agricultural land were exempt from the tax, then the tenant of a house or factory in the country would escape that part of the site tax which is assessed on the excess of the value of the land for building uses over its value for agriculture. This might slightly increase concentration in towns and thus take a little from the burden on site owners in them, but it would not materially affect the values of sites in the center of towns. See also below. Note 70. For instance, suppose an area of 1 million square feet to be covered with rows of parallel buildings, 40 feet high and 40 feet deep. A bylaw that the sky must subtend half a right angle to the ground, looking straight back as well as front, will cause the distance between each row and the next to be 40 feet. And the aggregate volume of building will be 40 feet multiplied into half the total area. That is 20 million cubic feet. Now, suppose the height of the buildings to be trebled. Under the same bylaw, the distances between the rows must be 120 feet, and on the supposition that it is not convenient to increase the depth of the houses beyond 40 feet, the aggregate volume of building will be 120 feet multiplied into a quarter of the total area. That is 30 million cubic feet. Thus, the total accommodation will be increased by only 1/2 instead of being trebled, as would have been the case if the old distances of 40 feet between the rows had been maintained. Note 71. See Chapter 6, Section 10, Paragraph 10. Note 72. See above, page 437. Note 73. See chapter 1, section 4, paragraphs 2 to 4. Note 74. In old times, the windows of a house were taken as representative of the house and were taxed heavily. But the tax did not strike and was not intended to strike persons as owners and users of windows only. It was intended to strike them, and did strike them, as owners and users of houses. And just as the window is a more or less good representative of the house, so the house is a representative, perhaps a better representative, of a certain scale and style of household expenditure in general. And when houses are taxed, the tax is and is intended to be a tax upon the ownership and use of the means of living in certain general conditions of comfort and social position. If part of the tax assessed on houses were removed, and the deficit made up by taxes assessed on furniture and indoor salons, the true incidence of the taxes would be nearly the same as now. Note 75. The recent Commission on Local Taxation was much occupied with the difficulty of assessing site values and with the even greater difficulty of making ad interim arrangements by which an equitable share, parenthesis opened, whether more or less, parenthesis closes, of the rates, which were designed in the long run to be paid by the ultimate landowners, might be transferred from the occupiers to lessees, parenthesis open. See especially page 153 to 176 of the final report, parenthesis close. The difficulty of assessment, though undoubtedly very great, is of a kind to be diminished rapidly by experience. The first 1,000 such assessments might probably give more trouble and yet be less accurately made than the next 20,000. End of Appendix G.
Appendix H of Principles of Economics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Principles of Economics by Alfred Marshall. Appendix H. Limitations of the use of statistical assumptions in regard to increasing return. Some hints have already been given of the difficulties which beset the theory of equilibrium in regard to commodities which obey the law of increasing return. These hints are now to be developed a little. The central point is that the term margin of production has no significance for long periods in relation to commodities, the cost of production of which diminishes with a gradual increase in the output, and a tendency to increasing return does not exist generally for short periods. Therefore, when we are discussing the special conditions of value of those commodities which conform to that tendency, the term margin should be avoided. It may be used, of course, for those commodities, as for all others, with regard to a short and quick fluctuation in demand, because in relation to such fluctuations, the production of those commodities, as well as others, conforms to the law of diminishing and not increasing return. But in problems in which the tendency to increasing return is in effective force, there is no clearly defined marginal product. In such problems, our units have to be larger. We have to consider the conditions of the representative firm rather than a given individual firm. And above all, we have to consider the cost of the whole process of production without any attempt to isolate that of a single commodity, such as a single rifle or a yard of cloth. It is true that when nearly the whole of any branch of industry is in the hands of a few giant businesses, none of them can be fairly described as representative. If these businesses are fused in a trust, or even closely combined with one another, the term normal expenses of production ceases to have a precise meaning. And, as will be fully argued in a later volume, it must be regarded as prima facie a monopoly, and its procedure must be analyzed in the lines of Book 5, Chapter 14, though the last years of the 19th century and the early years of this have shown that even in such cases, competition has a much greater force, and the use of the term normal is less inappropriate than seemed probable a priori. Let us return to the instance of an increased demand for aneroid barometers caused by a movement of fashion, which after a while had led to improved organization and to a lower supply price. When at last the force of fashion died away, and the demand for aneroids was again based solely on their real utility, this price might be either greater or less than the normal demand price for the corresponding scale of production. In the former case, capital and labor would avoid that trade. Of the firms already started, some might pursue their course, though with less net gains than they had hoped, but others would try to edge their way into some nearly related branch of production that was more prosperous, and as old firms dwindled, there would be few new ones to take their place. The scale of production would dwindle again, and the old position of equilibrium would have shown itself fairly stable against assaults. But now let us turn to the other case, in which the long period supply price for the increased output fell so far that the demand price remained above it. In that case, undertakers, looking forward to the life of a firm started in that trade, considering its chances of prosperity and decay, discounting its future outlays and its future incomings, would conclude that the latter showed a good balance over the former. Capital and labor would stream rapidly into the trade, and the production might perhaps be increased tenfold before the fall in the demand price became as great as the fall in the long period supply price, and a position of stable equilibrium had been found. For indeed, though in the account of the oscillations of demand and supply about a position of stable equilibrium, which was given in the 3rd chapter, it was tacitly implied, as is commonly done, that there could be only one position of stable equilibrium in a market. Yet, in fact, under certain conceivable, though rare conditions, there can be 2 or more positions of real equilibrium of demand and supply, any one of which is equally consistent with the general circumstances of the market, and any one of which, if once reached, would be stable until some great disturbance occurred. It must, however, be admitted that this theory is out of touch with real conditions of life, insofar as it assumes that, if the normal production of a commodity increases and afterwards again diminishes to its old amount, the demand price and the supply price will return to their old positions for that amount. Whether a commodity conforms to the law of diminishing or increasing return, the increase in consumption arising from a fall in price is gradual, and further, habits which have once grown up around the use of a commodity while its price is low are not quickly abandoned when its price rises again. If, therefore, after the supply has gradually increased, some of the sources from which it is derived should be closed, or any other cause should occur to make the commodity scarce, many consumers will be reluctant to depart from their wonted ways. For instance, the price of cotton during the American War was higher than it would have been if the previous low price had not brought cotton into common use to meet wants, many of which had been created by the low price. Thus, then, the list of demand prices which holds for the forward movement of the production of a commodity will seldom hold for the return movement, but will in general require to be raised. Again, the list of supply prices may have fairly represented the actual fall in the supply price of the thing that takes place when the supply is being increased. But if the demand should fall off, or if for any other reason the supply should have to be diminished, the supply price would not move back by the course by which it had come, but would take a lower course. The list of supply prices which had held for the forward movement would not hold for the backward movement, but would have to be replaced by a lower schedule. This is true whether the production of the commodity obeys the law of diminishing or increasing return, but it is of especial importance in the latter case, because the fact that the production does obey this law proves that its increase leads to great improvements in organization. For, when any casual disturbance has caused a great increase in the production of any commodity, and thereby has led to the introduction of extensive economies, these economies are not readily lost. developments of mechanical appliances, of division of labor, and of the means of transport, and improved organization of all kinds, when they have been once obtained, are not readily abandoned. Capital and labor, when they have been once devoted to any particular industry, may indeed become depreciated in value, if there is a falling off in the demand for the wares which they produce. But they cannot quickly be converted to other occupations, and their competition will for a time prevent a diminished demand from causing an increased price of the wares. Partly for this reason, there are not many cases in which two positions of stable equilibrium would stand out as possible alternatives at one and the same moment, even if all the facts of the market could be ascertained by the dealers concerned. But when the conditions of a branch of manufacture are such that the supply price would fall very rapidly if there should be any great increase in the scale of production, then a passing disturbance, by which the demand for the commodity was increased, might cause a very great fall in the stable equilibrium price, a very much larger amount than before being henceforward produced for sale at a very much lower price. This is always possible when, if we could trace the lists of demand and supply prices far ahead, we should find them keeping close together. For if the supply prices for largely increased amounts are but very little above the corresponding demand prices, a moderate increase in demand, or a comparatively slight new invention or other cheapening of production, may bring supply and demand prices together and make a new equilibrium. Such a change resembles in some respects a movement from one alternative position of stable equilibrium to another, but differs from the latter in that it cannot occur except when there is some change in the conditions of normal demand or normal supply. The unsatisfactory character of these results is partly due to the imperfections of our analytical methods, and may conceivably be much diminished in a later age by the gradual improvement of our scientific machinery. We should have made a great advance if we could represent the normal demand price and supply price as functions both of the amount normally produced and of the time at which that amount became normal. Let us revert to the distinction between average values and normal values. In a stationary state, the income earned by every appliance of production being truly anticipated beforehand would represent the normal measure of the efforts and sacrifices required to call it into existence. The aggregate expenses of production might then be found either by multiplying these marginal expenses by the number of units of the commodity, or by adding together all the actual expenses of production of its several parts, and adding in all the rents earned by differential advantages for production. The aggregate expenses of production being determined by either of these routes, the average expenses could be deduced by dividing out the amount of the commodity, and the result would be the normal supply price, whether for long periods or for short. But in the world in which we live, the term average expenses of production is somewhat misleading. For most of the appliances of production, material and personal, by which a commodity was made, came into existence long before. Their values are therefore not likely to be just what the producers expected them to be originally, but some of their values will be greater and others less. Thus, present incomes earned by them will be governed by the general relations between the demand for and the supply of their products, and their values will be arrived at by capitalizing these incomes. And therefore, when making out a list of normal supply prices, which in conjunction with the list of normal demand prices is to determine the equilibrium position of normal value, we cannot take for granted the values of these appliances for production without reasoning in a circle. This caution, which is of special importance with regard to industries that tend to increasing return, may be emphasized by a diagrammatic presentation of the relations of demand and supply, which are possible in a stationary state, but only there. There, every particular thing bears its proper share of supplementary costs, and it would not ever be worthwhile for a producer to accept a particular order at a price other than the total cost, in which is to be reckoned a charge for the task of building up the trade connection and external organization of a representative firm. The illustration has no positive value. It merely guards against a possible error in abstract reasoning. End of Appendix H. Appendix I of Principles of Economics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Principles of Economics by Alfred Marshall. Appendix I. Ricardo's Theory of Value. When Ricardo was addressing a general audience, he drew largely upon his wide and intimate knowledge of the facts of life, urging them for illustration, verification, or the premises of argument. But in his Principles of Political Economy, the same questions are treated with a singular exclusion of all reference to the actual world around him. And he wrote to Malthus in May 1820, the same year in which Malthus published his Principles of Political Economy, considered with a view to their practical application. Our differences may, in some respects, I think, be ascribed to your considering my book as more practical than I intended it to be. My object was to elucidate principles, and to do this I imagined strong cases, that I might show the operation of those principles. His book makes no pretense to be systematic. He was, with difficulty, induced to publish it, and if in writing it he had in view any readers at all, they were chiefly those statesmen and businessmen with whom he associated. So he purposely omitted many things which were necessary for the logical completeness of his argument, but which they would regard as obvious. And further, as he told Malthus in the following October, he was but a poor master of language. His exposition is as confused as his thought is profound. He uses words in artificial senses which he does not explain, and to which he does not adhere, and he changes from one hypothesis to another without giving notice. If, then, we seek to understand him rightly, we must interpret him generously, more generously than he himself interpreted Adam Smith. When his words are ambiguous, we must give them that interpretation which other passages in his writings indicate that he would have wished us to give them. If we do this with the desire to ascertain what he really meant, his doctrines, though very far from complete, are free from many of the errors that are commonly attributed to them. He considers, for instance, Principles, Chapter 1, that utility is absolutely essential to normal value, though not its measure, while the value of things, of which there is a very limited quantity, varies with the wealth and inclinations of those who are desirous to possess them. And elsewhere, Ibid, Chapter 4, he insists on the way in which the market fluctuations of prices are determined by the amount available for sale on the one hand, and the wants and wishes of mankind on the other. Again, in a profound, though very incomplete, discussion of the difference between value and riches, he seems to be feeling his way towards the distinction between marginal and total utility. For by riches he means total utility, and he seems to be always on the point of stating that value corresponds to the increment of riches which results from that part of the commodity which it is only just worth the while of purchasers to buy, and that when the supply runs short, whether temporarily in consequence of a passing accident, or permanently in consequence of an increase in cost of production, there is a rise in that marginal increment of riches which is measured by value, at the same time that there is a diminution in the aggregate riches, the total utility derived from the commodity. Throughout the whole discussion he is trying to say, though, being ignorant of the terse language of the differential calculus, he did not get hold of the right words in which to say it neatly, that marginal utility is raised and total utility is lessened by any check to supply. But while not thinking that he had much to say that was of great importance on the subject of utility, he believed that the connection between cost of production and value was imperfectly understood, and that erroneous views on the subject were likely to lead the country astray in practical problems of taxation and finance, and so he addressed himself specially to this subject. But here he also made shortcuts. For though he was aware that commodities fall into three classes according as they obey the law of diminishing, of constant, or of increasing return, yet he thought it best to ignore this distinction in a theory of value applicable to all kinds of commodities. A commodity chosen at random was just as likely to obey one as the other of the two laws of diminishing and of increasing return, and therefore he thought himself justified in assuming provisionally that they all obey the law of constant return. In this perhaps he was justified, but he made a mistake in not stating explicitly what he was doing. He argued in the first section of his first chapter that in the early stages of society, where there is scarcely any use of capital, and where any one man's labor has nearly the same price as any other man's, it is broadly speaking true that the value of a commodity, or the quantity of a commodity for which it will exchange, depends on the relative quantity of labor which is necessary for its production. That is, if two things are made by 12 and 4 men's labor for a year, all the men being of the same grade, the normal value of the former will be 3 times that of the latter. For if 10% has to be added for profits on the capital invested in the one case, 10% will need to be added in the other also. If W be a year's wages of a worker of this class, the cost of production will be 4W 110 over 100 and 12W 110 over 100, and the ratio of these is 4 to 12, or 1 to 3. But he went on to show that these assumptions cannot be properly made in later stages of civilization, and that the relation of value to cost of production is more complex than that with which he started. And his next step was to introduce in Section 2 the consideration that labor of different qualities is differently rewarded. If the wages of a jeweler are twice as great as those of a working laborer, an hour's work of the one must count for 2 hours' work of the other. Should there be a change in their relative wages, there will of course be a corresponding change in the relative values of things made by them. But instead of analyzing, as economists of this generation do, the causes which make, say, jewelers' wages change from one generation to another relatively to those of ordinary laborers, he contented himself with stating that such variations cannot be great. Next, in Section 3, he urged that in reckoning the cost of production of a commodity, account must be taken not only of the labor applied immediately to it, but also of that which is bestowed on the implements, tools, and buildings with which such labor is assisted. And here the element of time, which he had carefully kept in the background at starting, was necessarily introduced. Accordingly, in Section 4, he discusses more fully the different influences exerted on the value of a set of commodities. He uses this simple method sometimes to evade the difficulties of the distinctions between prime cost and total cost, and especially he takes account of the different effects of the application of circulating capital, which is consumed in a single use, and of fixed capital, and again of the time for which labor must be invested in making machinery to make commodities. If that be long, they will have a greater cost of production and be more valuable to compensate for the greater length of time, which must elapse before they can be brought to market. And lastly, in Section 5, he sums up the influence which different lengths of investment, whether direct or indirect, will have upon relative values, arguing correctly that if wages all rise and fall together, the change will have no permanent effect on the relative values of different commodities. But he argues if the rate of profits falls, it will lower the relative values of those commodities, the production of which requires capital to be invested a long while before they can be brought to market. For if in one case the average investment is for a year and requires 10% to be added to the wages bill for profits, and in another is for 2 years and requires 20% to be added, then a fall of profits by 1/5 will reduce the addition in the latter case from 20 to 16 shillings, and in the former only from 10 to 8. If their direct cost of labor is equal, the ratio of their values before the change will be 120 over 110, or 1.091, and after the change, 116 over 108, or 1.074, a fall of nearly 2%. His argument is avowedly only provisional. In later chapters, he takes account of other causes of differences in profits in different industries, besides the period of investment. But it seems difficult to imagine how he could more strongly have emphasized the fact that time, or waiting, as well as labor, is an element of cost of production than by occupying his first chapter with this discussion. Unfortunately, however, he delighted in short phrases, and he thought that his readers would always supply for themselves the explanations of which he had given them a hint. Once, indeed, in a note at the end of the 6th section of his first chapter, he says, "Mr. Malthus appears to think that it is a part of my doctrine that the cost and value of a thing should be the same. It is, if he means by cost, cost of production, including profits. In the above passage, this is what he does not mean, and therefore he has not clearly understood me. And yet, Rodbertus and Karl Marx claim Ricardo's authority for the statement that the natural value of things consists solely of the labor spent on them. And even those German economists who most strenuously combat the conclusion of these writers are often found to admit that they have interpreted Ricardo rightly, and that their conclusions follow logically from his. This and other facts of a similar kind show that Ricardo's reticence was an error of judgment. It would have been better if he had occasionally repeated the statement that the values of two commodities are to be regarded as in the long run proportionate to the amount of labor required for making them, only on the condition that other things are equal, i.e., that the labor employed in the two cases is equally skilled, and therefore equally highly paid, that it is assisted by proportionate amounts of capital, account being taken of the period of its investment, and that the rates of profit are equal. He does not state clearly, and in some cases he perhaps did not fully and clearly perceive how, in the problem of normal value, the various elements govern one another mutually, and not successively in a long chain of causation. And he was more guilty than almost anyone else of the bad habit of endeavoring to express great economic doctrines in short sentences. There are few writers of modern times who have approached as near to the brilliant originality of Ricardo as Jevons has done. But he appears to have judged both Ricardo and Mill harshly, and to have attributed to them doctrines narrower and less scientific than those which they really held. And his desire to emphasize an aspect of value to which they had given insufficient prominence was probably in some measure accountable for his saying, "Repeated reflection and inquiry have led me to the somewhat novel opinion that value depends entirely upon utility." Theory, page 1. This statement seems to be no less one-sided and fragmentary, and much more misleading, than that into which Ricardo often glided with careless brevity, as to the dependence of value on cost of production, but which he never regarded as more than a part of a larger doctrine, the rest of which he had tried to explain. Jevons continues, "We have only to trace out carefully the natural laws of variation of utility as depending upon the quantity of commodity in our possession, in order to arrive at a satisfactory theory of exchange, of which the ordinary laws of supply and demand are a necessary consequence. Labor is found often to determine value, but only in an indirect manner by varying the degree of utility of the commodity through an increase or limitation of the supply." As we shall presently see, the latter of these two statements had been made before in almost the same form, loose and inaccurate as it is, by Ricardo and Mill, but they would not have accepted the former statement. For while they regarded the natural laws of variation of utility as too obvious to require detailed explanation, and while they admitted that cost of production could have no effect upon exchange value if it could have none upon the amount which producers brought forward for sale, their doctrines imply that what is true of supply is true mutatis mutandis of demand, and that the utility of a commodity could have no effect upon its exchange value if it could have none on the amount which purchasers took off the market. Let us then turn to examine the chain of causation in which Jevons's central position is formulated in his second edition, and compare it with the position taken up by Ricardo and Mill. He says, page 179, "Cost of production determines supply. Supply determines final degree of utility. Final degree of utility determines value." Now, if this series of causations really existed, there could be no great harm in omitting the intermediate stages and saying that cost of production determines value. For if A is the cause of B, which is the cause of C, which is the cause of D, then A is the cause of D. But in fact, there is no such series. A preliminary objection might be taken to the ambiguity of the terms cost of production and supply, which Jevons ought to have avoided by the aid of that technical apparatus of semi-mathematical phrases, which was at his disposal, but not at Ricardo's. A graver objection lies against his third statement. For the price which the various purchasers in a market will pay for a thing is determined not solely by the final degrees of its utility to them, but by these in conjunction with the amounts of purchasing power severally at their disposal. The exchange value of a thing is the same all over a market, but the final degrees of utility to which it corresponds are not equal at any two parts. Jevons supposed himself to be getting nearer the foundations of exchange value when, in his account of the causes which determines it, he substituted the phrase final degree of utility for the price which consumers are only just willing to pay, the phrase which in the present treatise is condensed into marginal demand price. When, for instance, describing, second edition, page 105, the settlement of exchange between one trading body possessing only corn and another possessing only beef, he makes his diagram represent a person as gaining a utility measured along one line and losing a utility measured along another. But that is not what really happens. A trading body is not a person. It gives up things which represent equal purchasing power to all of its members, but very different utilities. It is true that Jevons was himself aware of this, and that his account can be made consistent with the facts of life by a series of interpretations, which in effect substitute demand price and supply price for utility and disutility. But when so amended, they lose much of their aggressive force against the older doctrines. And if both are to be held severely to a strict literal interpretation, then the older method of speaking, though not perfectly accurate, appears to be nearer the truth than that which Jevons and some of his followers have endeavored to substitute for it. But the greatest objection of all to his formal statement of his central doctrine is that it does not represent supply price, demand price, and the amount produced as mutually determining one another, subject to certain other conditions, but as determined one by another in a series. It is as though when three balls, A, B, and C, rest against one another in a bowl, instead of saying that the position of the three mutually determines one another under the action of gravity, he had said that A determines B and B determines C. Someone else, however, with equal justice, might say that C determines B and B determines A. And in reply to Jevons, a satana rather less untrue than his can be made by inverting his order and saying, utility determines the amount that has to be supplied. The amount that has to be supplied determines cost of production. Cost of production determines value because it determines the supply price which is required to make the producers keep to their work. Let us then turn to Ricardo's doctrine which, though unsystematic and open to many objections, seems to be more philosophic in principle and closer to the actual facts of life. He says, in the letter to Malthus already quoted, M. Say has not a correct notion of what is meant by value when he contends that a commodity is valuable in proportion to its utility. This would be true if buyers only regulated the value of commodities. Then, indeed, we might expect that all men would be willing to give a price for things in proportion to the estimation in which they held them. But the fact appears to me to be that buyers have the least in the world to do in regulating price. It is all done by the competition of the sellers, and however really willing the buyers might be to give more for iron than for gold, they could not, because the supply would be regulated by the cost of production. You say demand and supply regulates value. This, I think, is saying nothing, and for the reason I have given in the beginning of this letter. It is supply which regulates value, and supply itself is controlled by comparative cost of production. Cost of production in money means the value of labor as well as of profits. See pages 173 to 176 of Dr. Bonaire's excellent edition of these letters. And again, in his next letter, I do not dispute either the influence of demand on the price of corn or on the price of all other things, but supply follows close at its heels and soon takes the power of regulating price in his own hands, and in regulating it he is determined by cost of production. These letters were not indeed published when Jevons wrote, but there are very similar statements in Ricardo's Principles. Mill also, when discussing the value of money, Book 3, Chapter 9, Section 3, speaks of the law of demand and supply, which is acknowledged to be applicable to all commodities, and which, in the case of money, as of
All right.
is controlled but not set by the cost of production.
Thank you, Alfred. Okay. Let's find time for the banning. The banishing ritual. My favorite part of the show. Spirit be gone. Till I call thee forth again. Okay, ladies and gents. All right, we're talking about timely top stories in the world of finance. A little bit of programming news. Just in. I always like to give tips to my audience members out there. I guess this is, well, it's sort of programming news. I just discovered, Google Finance, by the way, sucks. All right, so I just want to put that out there for anybody who from Google who might be watching right now. I'm leaving you guys for financial news, and I'm going to Yahoo Finance. which is way better. I mean, it's just way better. Google, I don't know what you're doing over there with your finance news feed, but it is lame. It is propaganda central. Can you go? I mean, I know it's a lot to ask, Google, but can you lighten up on the propaganda a little bit, please? It kind of gets in the way of getting good, reliable, solid information. All right. Anyway, the Yahoo Finance, I find that the Yahoo Finance news feed is better. Okay, we'll see how long that lasts. So I think it'll probably last longer. I'm kind of kicking myself for sticking with the Google Finance news feed as long as I did. I mean, it's all just, oh, God. They're going to hell in a handbasket, ladies and gentlemen. When you try to get political with stuff like that, you're totally destroying the product, guys. Dang. All right. Here's some big news in the world of finance. Michael Bloomberg launches presidential bid. All right, let's see what this is about. Let's see here. Coming at you from the AP. Come on already. What is this? Hello. What are you doing? Okay, well, dang. What is this? What the heck is this? Okay, I'm starting to not like Yahoo. Okay, it took me to Yahoo News. I don't want to go to Yahoo News. Oh, here we go. This is where I wanted to go. All right. What's going on here? What are you people doing to me? Gosh. Okay. What are you doing? New York AP billionaire and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, one of the world's richest men, has formally launched a Democratic bid for president. Ending weeks of speculation, the 77-year-old former Republican announced his candidacy Sunday. Okay, what's going on here? Okay. Meal, please. Thank you. Ending weeks of speculation, the 77-year-old former Republican announced his candidacy Sunday in a written statement posted on a campaign website describing himself as uniquely positioned to defeat President Donald Trump. He will quickly follow with a massive advertising campaign blanketing airways in key primary states across the U.S. I'm running for president to defeat Donald Trump and rebuild America, Bloomberg wrote. We cannot afford 4 more years of President Trump's reckless and unethical actions, he continued. He represents an existential threat to our country and our values. If he wins another term in office, we may never recover from the damage. Okay, that was a quote there. Bloomberg's entrance comes just 10 weeks before primary voting begins, an unorthodox move that reflects anxiety within the Democratic Party about the strength of its current candidates. As a centrist with deep ties to Wall Street, Bloomberg is expected to struggle among the party's energized progressive base. He became a Democrat only last year, yet his tremendous resources and moderate profile could be appealing in a primary contest that has become, above all, a quest to find the person best positioned to deny Trump a second term next November. Forbes ranked Bloomberg as the 11th richest person in the world last year, with a net worth of roughly $50 billion. Trump, by contrast, was ranked 259th, with a net worth of just over $3 billion. Already, Bloomberg has vowed to spend at least $150 million of his fortune on various pieces of a 2020 campaign, including more than $100 million for internet ads attacking Trump, between $15 million and $20 million on a voter registration drive largely targeting minority voters, and more than $30 million on an initial round of television ads. He did not say how much he would be willing to spend overall on his presidential ambitions, but senior advisor Howard Wolfson did, whatever it takes to defeat Donald Trump. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay. All right, fair enough. Michael Bloomberg running for president against Trump. Moving on. I know it's political news, but since it is about Bloomberg, it's a financial story. It's a crossover story, as it were. All right. Uber in last-ditch talks to extend the London license. All right, Uber is fighting a last-ditch battle to continue operating in London as the city's transport agency weighs whether to renew its license to operate in the UK capital. Transport for London in September granted Uber an unexpectedly short 2-month permit for its ride-hailing service, setting the clock ticking on a frantic round of negotiations. By the way, I don't know if I said this or not, but caller lines are wide open, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. We still got a little under an hour left in the show, so you have plenty of time to call in. If you'd like to call in, that number is 657-383-1825. 657-383-1825. Give us a call. Be a part of the big show. Let your voice be heard. Continue reading. Yeah, that's why I clicked on it. Hello? Oh, come on! These sons of bleep. These sons of bleep. Well, man. Come on. That was just a teaser, ladies and gentlemen. They gave me one paragraph. And then I had to subscribe to read the rest. That is ridiculous. You're not even going to let me steal. You're not going to let me steal content off the internet? That is just ridiculous. What's down here then? I don't know. Okay. Moving on to the next story. Okay, moving on to the next story. Moving on to the next story. Hey, oh, okay, here we go. Yeah. There's Bloomberg. Head, okay, here we go. Head of the world's largest hedge fund says report of a massive $1 billion bet that the stock market will tumble by, let's see here. What's going on here? Let's see. All right. Coming at you from the fine folks at Market Watch. I'm starting to see why maybe I did like Google better than. Okay, yeah. All right. I guess I'm going to have to go back to Google Finance after all. These guys want me to actually pay for the articles. I can't do that. Sorry. Not doing it right now. I might do it later, but you have to go to the premium site. They give you like the first paragraph, then you have to go to the premium site to read the rest of the article. And that's just ridiculous. Can't even steal content anymore. Okay, I guess I'm going to have to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to have to go back to Google Finance, and I will sort through the propaganda for you. Okay, top stories. A vegan sued Burger King over its Impossible Whopper. He has a point. Really, does that have anything to do with finance? I mean, come on. 7 funky features on Tesla's Cybertruck. That's more of an ad. That's like an ad for Tesla's Cybertruck. Not really, a top story. I guess to get a top story on Google Finance, you've got to kind of, grease a couple palms, it looks like. It basically looks like they're paid advertisements without saying as much. That's right. I'm on to you guys. Ripple's XRP ledger sets new daily transaction record, dwarfing Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's see what this article is about. Oh, screw it. I'm just going to go with the vegan who sued Burger King over its Impossible Whopper. He has a point. Hey, you know what? Beggars can't be choosers, right? Ain't that what they say? Oh, by the way, this is an op-ed, an opinion piece, so bear that in mind. Is it really true that Burger King's new Impossible Whopper is, as the ad claims? Okay, well, if this is an opinion piece, okay, this is definitely. I'm pretty skeptical. I'm pretty cynical. I'm thinking this is probably PR. This is a PR stunt by a Burger King rival. I'm not 100% sure, but this is a common tactic used in public relations. So I guess we can come at it from that angle if we want. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to expose to you a common trick in the world of public relations, and that is to write in if you want to talk smack about your competitor, and maybe get people to not go there and go to your place. You write an op-ed, you write an opinion piece, right. I mean, it's disguised as an op-ed, but really you're just writing an opinion piece so everyone can see it. And then, anyway, it's a kind of a clever tactic, but it's a common tactic used quite often, but it's very effective. So it's probably McDonald's or somebody who wrote this, but okay, here we go. Bloomberg opinion. This is an op-ed piece from Bloomberg. Is it really true that Burger King's new Impossible Whopper is, as the ads claim, 100% Whopper, 0% beef? A lawsuit just filed in federal court in Florida insists that the answer is no. The answer matters. The Impossible Whopper, designed to attract vegetarians and vegans who ordinarily avoid fast food, has driven a surge of traffic into the chain's restaurants. Comparable sales growth in the third quarter of 2019, the quarter following the sandwich's introduction, was a brisk 4.8%. Key to the Impossible Whopper's attraction is the notion that it tastes like meat without actually containing any. Okay, I got to say, I had, as research for this particular story, I actually have had an Impossible Whopper. Doesn't really taste, I mean, it's kind of similar to meat. Kind of the texture is kind of similar, but, it doesn't taste just like meat, though. But it wasn't too bad. I could see me, if I turn vegetarian, I actually have been vegetarian before in the past, not completely vegan, but vegetarian. I was what they call a lacto-vegetarian. I still ate eggs and dairy, but a couple times in the past I did that. But so I can see during that period, I probably would have eaten a lot of these Impossible Whoppers or whatever. Okay, so let's move it on. Enter Philip Williams, the plaintiff in the Florida lawsuit. Williams says he is a vegan who purchased an Impossible Whopper because of that 0% promise, only to learn later that the patty was cooked on the same broiler as regular meat burgers, and thus was actually coated in meat byproducts. Burger King has declined to comment. Oh. Uh-oh. Now, I'm as quick as anybody to condemn frivolous litigation. But if the allegations are true, Williams might well have a case. Vibrant free markets rely on truthful advertising, at least when the advertising influences the purchase decision. If a consumer happens to be vegetarian or vegan, or even like me, pesky politarian, I have no idea. I guess it means he eats fish and eggs. I'm thinking pescipolitarian. It's very Italian sounding, I guess. I don't know. The claim that the Impossible Whopper contains no meat will be crucial to the choice whether to give the sandwich a try. Not long ago, courts turned skeptical eyes to arguments by vegans that they'd been snookered. Back in 2003, for instance, a California judge dismissed a lawsuit by a strict ethical vegan against the maker of a tuberculosis test that, according to the plaintiff, was said to be vegan-friendly but actually contained animal products. The plaintiff lost not because the claim was ridiculous, but because, according to the court, the class of strict ethical vegans was too small. A reasonably prudent seller, wrote the court, possessed no duty to warn of the possibility of rare, idiosyncratic, hypersensitive, or unusual reactions to an otherwise safe and useful product. The court's reasoning is dated, the product of an era when veganism seemed quirky. No longer, according to a 2018 Gallup survey, some 3% of U.S. adults say they are vegan. Using current census data, this works out to around 7.6 million vegans. One doubts, therefore, that a present-day court would so blithely conclude that the class of those likely to be influenced by a claim of vegan content is small, or that its preferences are idiosyncratic. And indeed, recent results have trended the other way. In 2017, for example, a federal judge in Tennessee refused to dismiss a suit against Whole Foods brought by a mother who had purchased 2 slices of vegan pizza for her daughter, who then suffered a severe allergic reaction because the pizza contained nuts. Whole Foods pointed out that vegans generally do eat nuts, but the court was unimpressed. An ordinary consumer purchasing a slice of vegan pizza may well expect that it would not be topped with pepperoni, sausage, or other meats. But the court cannot say, as a matter of law, that the same consumer would understand that the pizza slice could contain pecan chips. So, among the court decisions reviewed for this column, the one with the most to teach us about the Impossible Whopper suit arose when a consumer who was a devout Muslim sued the maker of Nature-Made vitamins for alleged misrepresentation after discovering that the B12 vitamins she had been taking were enclosed in a gelatin coating containing pork products. The plaintiff pointed to a number of statements on the company's website that spoke of transparency, and one that stated vitamin B12 supplements are recommended for vegetarians and vegans who avoid dietary sources rich in vitamin B12. The case was dismissed in 2013, but it's important to understand why. According to the court, none of the cited statements were actionable because all either failed to make a financial assertion or were in the category of puffery. Puffery, a mere puff, as the courts used to say, is an extravagant advertising claim made in a context where no reasonable consumer would take it to be a factual assertion. Exaggeration, hyperbole, and absurdity are often puffery's ingredients. Think service second to none, or best built car on the planet. Had Burger King advertised its Impossible Whopper as containing so little meat a vegan won't care, a court would certainly have deemed the claim puffery. Okay. If you say so. Moving on. Oh, shoot. Moving on. Oh, this was... 7 funky features on Tesla's Cybertruck. Coming at you. Coming at you. All right.
How to organize receipts.
Okay. All right. What is this about here? Let's see. No, leave me alone. Be gone. Spirit, be gone. Oh, come on. Oh, God. Guys make me sick. I hate talking heads. They're nauseating. Okay. The electric Tesla Cybertruck. I guess I am a talking head. I'm sorry. I take that back. I just didn't even... I'm a self-hating talking head. I admit it. Okay, anyway. All right, we're talking about the Tesla electric Cybertruck. I'm looking at a picture of it right now. It looks pretty damn cool. Yeah, I recommend. Yeah, we'll check those out on the internet, man. These things are looks badass. Looks pretty futuristic. Looks like something out of Mad Max. The electric Tesla Cybertruck may have outlandish style, but at heart, it's still just a four-wheel, four-door pickup that you can read more about by you can read more about by clicking here. Okay, I don't know is that where the ad is or something? I don't know. That said, it does offer plenty of features you won't find on many other mass-market trucks, and not just its battery pack. Here are a few of the standouts. Okay, I know this is like a shameless ad for the new Tesla Cybertruck, but I'm curious. I just I want to see what's on this thing. Along with its full-width LED headlight bar, there's an auxiliary strip for off-road driving hidden at the top of its windshield, just below the unique peak in its roof. Off-wheel driving, huh? Or off-road driving. The Cybertruck's body is constructed of thick sheets of the same 30 times cold-rolled stainless steel used on the SpaceX Starship. Along with being scratch and dent resistant, Tesla claims it can withstand a 9mm firearm round. Okay, so the armor windows were super strong too. So the new Tesla truck is an armored vehicle. So you got that going for you. I guess maybe they're trying to whip up something can be have military purposes. I guess I don't know. Instead of a hoop, the Cybertruck has a steering wheel modeled after the type on an aircraft yoke with grips at 9 and 3 o'clock. Interesting. It's got wings. What? Along with a covered bed with a trunk in the floor and a frunk under the hood, each of the rear roof buttresses hides storage compartments beneath butterfly doors. Yeah, it's kind of got a bed in the back like a pickup, but you can hide it really well with the rear roof buttresses. Okay, whatever. Moving on. The powered bed cover is strong enough to walk on and fully retracts into the space between the bed and the cabin when it's opened. I know it seems like I'm doing a commercial for the Cybertruck, the new Cybertruck by Tesla, but I really am interested in this. I'm not getting paid. I still find this kind of interesting. This truck. By the way, I mean I would take a paycheck if you want, Elon Musk. So yeah, just please, if you want to make a donation, just send it to Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Mo 63301. And I'd be more than happy to be your spokesperson, but I'm just doing this out of the goodness of my heart. The Cybertruck will come with an optional Cyber Quad electric ATV that you can drive into the bed using a ramp that extends from the tailgate as the pickup's standard air suspension system squats. Damn. Cyber Quad electric ATV. It's optional. Comes with it, though. I mean, dang. Like some traditional trucks, the Cybertruck has 3 across front seating thanks to a center jump seat that turns into an armrest when not in use. Okay, Tesla will offer a camping package that includes a polygonal tent to match its styling, a raised sleeping floor for the bed, and a slide-out electric stove that runs off the battery pack. Okay, once again, come on, this wasn't meant to be shameless promotion. I just was really interested in that. And hey, I don't know. It looks pretty cool. I think yeah, by the way, if you want to send me one of those, send that to Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. All right. Ripple's XRP ledger sets new daily transaction record, dwarfing Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. Ripple's XRP ledger sets new daily transaction record, dwarfing. Well, thank you. Leave me alone. New daily transaction record, dwarfing Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. Ripple's daily transaction volume blasts past the 4-minute mark for the first time, significantly surpassing other top cryptocurrencies. On November 23rd, the number of transactions on the XRP ledger skyrocketed to a whopping 4 minutes. I'm sorry, 4 minutes. I'm an idiot. 4 MLN. Ugh, 4 minutes. 4 million. Skyrocketed to a record whopping 4 million? Okay, I'm in. All right. Sorry, everyone. 4 minutes. 4 million. Thus allowing the third biggest cryptocurrency to easily shatter the previous record of 1.7 million transactions that was set in January, according to data provided by Bitcoin charts or BitInfo charts. Okay. A new daily volume high. It is worth noting that XRP managed to greatly outperform other top cryptocurrencies when it comes to the daily transactions volume. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin have all failed to breach the 1 million mark. All right. During Ripple's swelled event, the company's CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, claimed that 2019 was their strongest year. RippleNet, the blockchain payment platform that runs on Ripple's software, now boasts more than 300 customers around the globe. What? Such big names as MoneyGram, FlashFX, and Bitso use the on-demand liquidity ODL product. Speaking of the latter, the XRP MXN liquidity index recently hit 6.34 million on the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in Mexico. Oddly enough, this flurry of positive news didn't translate into the token's price performance. On November 22nd, it reached $0.226, its lowest point since November 22nd, 2017. Yes, XRP hasn't performed this badly after the peak of the previous bull run. Okay. Anyway, at the time of writing, the token is sitting at, man, that's bad, $0.229. But crypto Twitter is already rife with bearish price predictions, despite the community's enthusiasm. According to trader Donald, a drop to the $0.19 level, or that's the 19-cent level, sorry, could be on the cards. All right, so whatever. Yeah, by the way, I should have just said 30 cents. I don't know why I was saying $0.229. well, or point, I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. 23 cents, 30 cents, whatever. Okay, moving on. Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade deal to show fallacy of free trade. What? Come on, man. How so? Let's see what he means. What is he saying exactly? What is this guy? Some sort of dang communist? Sort of pinko? Sort of pinko hippie commie? Well, we'll see. Let's see what he's talking about. Come on, man. Just weeks after Charles Schwab turned the industry upside down by cutting online stock trading commissions to zero, word broke Thursday that it is in discussions to acquire rival TD Ameritrade for $26 billion. I think I covered this story the other day. I'll cover it again. Why not? Last show wasn't too good. I was not feeling that good. I had to get out of here early, so maybe I didn't really cover it that great. So let's see here. If the deal to merge the country's two largest discount brokerage goes through, the resulting behemoth will essentially dominate the free trading space and make for a profitable powerhouse to compete with the big boys on Wall Street. But why would any company want to expand in a field that offers its product for free? Simple. Because it's not really free. While you may pay zero on a stock or ETF trade, the broker bundles your trades with others, then sells the order flow and collects rebates. That's where the real money is. On the institutional side, rebates have been captured for years and credited to the corresponding fund via the exchanges directly. What's going on here? Leave me alone, please. Got an annoying pop-up ad. All right. Messing with my flow. All right. On the institutional side, rebates have been captured for years and credited to the corresponding fund via the exchanges directly. The interest rate spreads on cash and margin balances. The interest rate spreads on cash and margin balances are extremely lucrative as well. And while it's good that individuals can trade for zero commissions, the fact is the track record for individuals picking and trading stocks on their own is dismal. A quick glance at Schwab's 2018 revenue shows that only 7% of the firm's revenue came from trading last year, and 88% came from interest rate spreads and asset management and service fees combined. And those fees are not getting cut yet. Sadly, if the merger goes through, the likely additional cuts will be thousands of redundant back office jobs. Depending on how the Democratic primary shakes out, there may be yet another financial firm for Schwab to buy. Bloomberg LP, and if candidate Michael Bloomberg sells to avoid a conflict of interest, it could even be tax-free. All right, so thank you for that. Moving on. Moving on. Okay. 3 dividend stocks to buy on sale. Or so says the Motley Fool. Major stock market indexes are hitting all-time highs. The current bull market is the longest one ever and is now in the 11th year. Its 11th year. You might think it would be hard to find bargain stocks, and you probably think that it's even harder to find bargain dividend stocks. While most dividend stocks are relatively pricey, there are still some bargains to be found. 3 dividend stocks that you can buy on sale right now are AbbVie, Gilead Sciences, that's on NASDAQ, Gilead Sciences, and Verizon Communications. All right. There you go. Moving on. I mean, not done with this article, but all right, let's see here. AbbVie. Okay. If you're looking for a dividend stock with a fantastic pedigree, you'll love AbbVie. The company is a dividend aristocrat with 48 consecutive years of dividend increases, including its time as part of Abbott Labs. Since being spun off from Abbott in 2013, AbbVie has boosted its dividend payout by a whopping 168%. Its dividend yield now stands at 5.5%. AbbVie shares trade at a little over 9 times expected earnings, well below the valuation of most big pharma stocks. It's cheap for a reason. Investors are worried about the company's prospects, with its top-selling drug, Humira, facing biosimilar competition in Europe and biosimilars in the U.S. on the way in 2023. There's no question that declining sales for Humira present a problem to AbbVie. After all, the drug currently generates 58% of the company's total revenue. But it is thought AbbVie's dividend will be in jeopardy at all, or it is not thought. Okay, anyway, the writer of this article, which I don't know who it is right now, The Motley Fool, does not think AbbVie's dividend will be in jeopardy at all because of the company's strategy to reduce its dependence on Humira. A key part of that strategy is the launch of new drugs. AbbVie rolled out 2 immunology drugs this year, Rinvoq and Skyrizi. That should be huge blockbusters in the near future. The company also already has 2 cancer drugs, fast-growing sales, Imbruvica and Venclexta. I don't know how to pronounce that. In addition, AbbVie's pending acquisition of Allergan will make it significantly less reliant on Humira. While AbbVie will almost certainly face some bumps in the road over the next few years, its dividend payout should keep giving income-seeking investors a smooth ride. 2, you got Gilead Sciences. Gilead Sciences admittedly doesn't have the impressive dividend track record of AbbVie. The big biotech didn't even initiate a dividend program until 2015. Gilead has shown a solid commitment to paying dividends since then, increasing its payout by nearly 47% in just 4 years. Its dividend now yields nearly 3.9%. While many biotech stocks command premium valuations, Gilead shares trade at close to 9 times expected earnings. The stock has been hammered over the last few years as sales for the company's hepatitis C virus, HCV, franchise declined. Gilead's HCV drugs cured so many patients that the market shrank. At the same time, competition increased, mainly from AbbVie. But Gilead continues to dominate the HIV market. Biktarvy appears to be on track to become the best-selling HIV drug of all time. The biotech is also achieving significant clinical progress with potential long-term HIV therapy, GS6207, a drug that RBC Capital Markets analyst Brian Abrahams views as the future of Gilead's HIV franchise. Gilead is also expanding into new therapeutic areas. It hopes to win U.S. and European regulatory approval for filgotinib in treating rheumatoid arthritis. The biotech's pipeline includes drugs targeting non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, a liver disease with no approved treatments yet. Gilead remains the leader in cancer cell therapy as well, with Yescarta picking up momentum. The company appears to be in a solid position to keep its attractive dividends flowing. 3. Verizon Communications. Not every bargain dividend stock is in the healthcare space. Telecommunications giant Verizon has increased its dividend for 13 years in a row. Its dividend yield currently stands at 4.1%. Verizon isn't quite as cheap as AbbVie and Gilead, but its valuation still appears to be quite attractive. Shares trade at 11 times expected earnings on another popular valuation metric. Enterprise value to EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Verizon is even cheaper than the two healthcare stocks and its chief rival AT&T. The primary reason Verizon is priced at such a discount is the intense competition in the telecom industry. Verizon and its rivals are cutting prices to retain and attract customers. They're also competing by offering bundling deals with TV streaming services. For example, Verizon is bundling a one-year subscription to Disney's new Disney Plus streaming service with its own unlimited wireless plans and certain other products. Despite the stiff competition, though, Verizon's dividend program shouldn't be phased at all. The company also should have a new growth driver with the rollout of high-speed 5G networks. 10 stocks we like better than Gilead Sciences. When investing geniuses, David and Tom Gardner have a stock tip it can pay to listen. After all, the newsletter they have run for, that's a segue into the premium section, which I am not going to go into right now, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, we've got about 10 minutes left in the big show. You want to call in? Be a big shot, let your voice be heard. Please feel free. That number is 657-383-1825. 657-383-1825. Okay, what else? What else be going on? Earnings recession is expected to swallow all of 2019 after holiday forecasts disappoint. All right, that's local market news. S&P 500, biggest stock winners and losers this week. All right, well, let's see here. I'll bite on that. This seems like a promising article. The S&P 500 entered the week at an all-time high, but fell this week after disappointing retail earnings and mixed signals on China trade war. Here are some of the winning and losing stocks in the S&P 500 from this week. Or last week, rather. Whatever. Get the idea. Oh, let's see. Let's see here. Oh. Oh, come on, leave me alone.
Jeff, the market's looking for direction right now, and investors are looking for clarity on the trade war. But I want to address the elephant in the room, which is...
Well, go ahead. But do it on your own time, honey. Wow, that was pretty sexist, huh? Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, ladies. I didn't mean to be demeaning to the female species. The S&P 500 closed down on the week, but only after hitting all-time highs last Friday. Below are some of the selected winners and losers from the S&P 500 that contributed to the week that saw retail stocks get hit hard. S&P 500 winners this week. Target Corporation. Percentage increase, 12.2%. Friday closing price, $127.02. Target shares hit a record high this week after the retailer posted stronger than expected third quarter earnings. A Raymond James analyst raised his price target on shares of the retailer to $150 this week. If you're looking to start investing in retail after this week, here is a guide. Okay, no, all right. No, I'm not going to go into your guide. Okay, number 2. Okay, once again. All right, S&P 500's biggest stock winners and losers this week. Number 2. The Charles Schwab percentage, the Charles Schwab Corporation, which we were just discussing, percentage increase 8.68%. Friday closing price $48.20. The Charles Schwab Corporation reported a $3.85 trillion in client assets after they introduced no-fee trading. CNBC reported on Thursday that Charles Schwab is eyeing TD Ameritrade for a takeover. All right, the Charles Schwab Corporation quantitative analysis by the Street Quant Ratings. The Street Quant Ratings rates the Charles Schwab Corporation as a buy with a rating score of B-. Okay, it's not too shabby. It's not as good as an A, but whatever, B-. It's above average, right? All right, number 3, Netflix Incorporated. Percentage increase, up 5.24%. Friday closing price, $310.48. Netflix Incorporated saw competition enter the streaming wars last week with Disney Plus, but unfortunately for the House of Mouse, they may not be as big of a threat as some investors may think. The Street also gave an update on where 5 tech stock, anyway, not going into that. Trying to trick me to go into their premium section, and I'm not doing it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not doing it. Netflix Incorporated quantitative analysis by the Street Quant Ratings. The Street Quant Ratings rates Netflix Incorporated as a hold with a rating score of C. So I don't know. Nothing to get too excited about. All right, S&P 500 losers this week. Kohl's Corporation percentage decrease, down 20.45%. Friday closing price, $47. Kohl's unfortunately started the week getting crushed on earnings. Shares recouped a little on Wednesday, but were given downgrades from Tesla and Goldman Sachs. The street quant ratings, however, rates Kohl's a buy with a rating score of B-, despite the rather poor performance last week. They still rate higher than Netflix. So you might want to bear that in mind. Number 2, loser of the week of last week. TripAdvisor Incorporated, percentage decrease, down 10.15%. Friday closing price, $27.98. TripAdvisor shares continue sinking after the vacation booking company reported third quarter earnings earlier this month and missed expectations. The Street Quant Ratings rates TripAdvisor as a hold with a rating score of C. 3, Macy's Incorporated, percentage decrease, negative 8.43%. Friday closing price, $15.43. Macy's Incorporated actually posted stronger than expected earnings, but said same-store sales fell notably and trimmed its full-year profit guidance. Jeff Marks of Action Alerts Plus gave investors a guide to approaching Macy's this week. The Street also asked if Macy's is a buy after earnings and how to trade it if you think an opportunity is available. Macy's Incorporated quantitative analysis by the Street Quant Ratings. The Street Quant Ratings rates Macy's Inc. as a hold with a rating score of C. Okay. Moving on. What do we got here? Here are, earnings recession is expected to swallow all of 2019 after holiday forecasts disappoint. An entire year of earnings declines is in the forecast after fourth quarter projections send expectations from a gain of more than 5% to a decline. Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to have to call BS on this, I think. Let's see. The holiday season is no longer expected to pull corporate earnings out of a recession that has lasted the entire year. Earnings in the S&P 500 index are now, which closed Friday at up 0.22%. Okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is the part of the show where we end it, and that's all there is to it. So, ladies and gents, I want to thank you all for tuning in today, and another friendly reminder. The rant with Charles Lamson is completely audience supported. So we ask that you donate. Just send cash, check, or money order to Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. That's Charles Lamson, 1203 Fox Chase Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. And until we meet again, don't take any wooden nickels, everyone.